Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. The illusion of passion. At the beginning, everything feels like fire. The connection is magnetic, intense, almost overwhelming. You tell yourself you have never felt anything like this before. The way they look at you, the way every word or gesture seems to carry a charge of electricity, it feels like destiny. The first weeks, or maybe the first months, are filled with a rush so strong it blurs the edges of reality. Arguments, if they happen, are quickly swallowed up by passionate reconciliations that leave you breathless, convinced that such extremes must mean something profound. This is where many toxic relationships disguise themselves most convincingly. They offer intensity, and intensity feels rare. After all, most of us are told stories about love that shakes us, love that consumes us, love that is meant to be bigger than life itself. So when you meet someone who seems to set your world ablaze, you mistake the fire for proof. You think, this is it, this is real. But intensity is not love. Intensity is imbalance. It is a rush of chemicals in your brain, dopamine released in cycles of conflict and relief. The fights, followed by reconciliations, create a pattern much like an addiction. You begin to crave the ups and downs, mistaking adrenaline for connection. The more chaotic the cycle, the deeper you believe the bond must be. Psychoanalysis offers an explanation for why this illusion feels so powerful. Freud described something called the compulsion to repeat, the unconscious drive to recreate familiar emotional experiences, even when they hurt us. If you grew up in an environment where love was unstable, where affection came mixed with fear, distance, or pain, your brain learned that love and suffering are tied together. Without realizing it, you carry that script into adulthood. The chaos feels familiar, and therefore, it feels right. You do not reject instability, you recognize it. Eric Fromm, the social psychologist, went further. He wrote about symbiotic love, a state where two people merge into each other, not as equals, but as dependents trapped in an illusion of unity. In these relationships, drama becomes routine. The emotional highs and lows, the jealousy, the arguments, the reconciliations, they all create a feeling of depth that is not truly there. You believe that if it hurts, it must be real. But this is a dangerous mistake. Healthy relationships, in truth, often look boring to those addicted to intensity. They are calm. They are stable. They do not shake you to your core every day. They allow space for growth, for rest, for individuality. But when you are caught in the cycle of toxic passion, calm feels like emptiness. Consistency feels like indifference. Your mind begins to believe that love must knock you off balance, that it must consume you. This is the cruelest trick of toxic love. It convinces you that the storm is proof of depth, when in reality, the storm is just the storm. What you mistake for rare connection is often the reactivation of old wounds you never healed. And the more intense it is, the harder it becomes to let go, because you are not just fighting for this relationship, you are fighting to rewrite the past. The urge to save. At some point, the intensity that once felt intoxicating begins to reveal cracks. You notice destructive behaviors, bursts of anger, cold silences, patterns of sabotage, or sudden disappearances. And instead of stepping back, something deep inside you awakens. It isn't fear at first, it's mission. An urgent desire to heal, to rescue, to save. Suddenly, the relationship is no longer just about love. It becomes a project. And you, often without realizing it, take on the role of savior. This is one of the most seductive traps of a toxic relationship. It disguises itself as compassion, even as love in its highest form. You think, if I am patient enough, they will change. If I love hard enough, they will heal. If I endure just a little longer, everything will finally be different. The narrative feels noble, even heroic. But beneath that surface, it is not about them, it is about you. Psychologists call this projection. Carl Jung explained that what we repress, deny, or cannot face within ourselves, we often see reflected in others. If you carry unresolved insecurity, you may find yourself drawn to an insecure partner, hoping that by strengthening them, you will feel stronger too. If you bury your anger, you may be pulled towards someone explosive, telling yourself your role is to calm them. Without knowing it, you use the other as a mirror to confront parts of yourself you would rather not see. Eric Fromm described a similar phenomenon as neurotic love. In this pattern, affection is conditional. You feel valuable only if you are useful, needed, or indispensable. Love becomes transactional. I give endlessly, therefore I matter. This kind of love is never free. It is earned, and the price is your own well-being. The cycle that follows is brutal. The more you try to help, the more resistance you face. The more resistance you face, the harder you try. And when things don't improve, you don't blame the other person, you blame yourself. Maybe I wasn't patient enough. Maybe I didn't love hard enough. Maybe if I just try one more time, it will finally work. Slowly, the mission consumes you. The truth is harsh but necessary. You are not in a relationship anymore. You are in a battlefield with invisible enemies, fighting ghosts from your own past, fighting wounds that are not yours to heal. And the more you fight, the weaker you become. Worse still, while you pour everything into saving them, you begin to lose yourself. Your needs shrink. Your voice fades. Your boundaries dissolve. Every decision starts to revolve around the other person's moods and crises. You shape yourself into what they need, not who you are. Until one day you realize, you no longer recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. This is the cruel paradox of trying to save someone in a toxic relationship. The more you fight for them, the more you abandon yourself. The more you try to repair their wounds, the deeper your own wounds become. And in the end, you may find that the person you were trying to save was never willing, or perhaps never able, to be saved at all. Losing yourself. In the beginning, you still remembered who you were. You had opinions that were yours alone, dreams that stretched far into the future, and passions that filled you with quiet joy. But slowly, so slowly you hardly noticed, it began to change. First, you adjusted small things, a choice of clothes, a tone of voice, a forgotten hobby. Then, you began reshaping bigger parts, which friends you saw, what goals you pursued, even how you spoke about yourself. Until one day, you looked in the mirror and realized the person staring back felt strangely unfamiliar. This is the silent erosion of identity that toxic relationships bring. It doesn't happen with a single demand or a dramatic confrontation. It happens in whispers, in compromises disguised as love, in decisions made for peace. You think, it's not worth the argument. Better to keep quiet. Better to let it go. But over time, every better to let it go chisels away at who you are. Psychologists have long described this disintegration. Eric Fromm called it symbiotic fusion, a state where two people stop existing as individuals and become entangled in a blurred emotional unit. In such a bond, your sense of self is no longer anchored within you, it is dictated by the other. Their moods decide whether you feel safe. Their crises determine whether you can rest. Their silence becomes your storm. You start calculating every word before you speak, censoring your natural reactions to avoid conflict. You hide your disappointments, suppress your anger, minimize your needs. Freud explained this as ego repression, when survival within the relationship depends on silencing your true impulses, you push them down so far that, eventually, you forget they exist. The result is not immediate pain, but emptiness. A dull ache that creeps into everyday life. You stop laughing the way you once did. You stop pursuing the little joys that made you feel alive. Friends notice a difference, but you brush it off. I'm just busy. I'm just tired. In truth, you are slowly vanishing under the weight of another's expectations. This disconnection manifests in subtle ways. Perhaps you once loved painting, but the brushes now gather dust. Perhaps you once dreamed of traveling, but now even the thought feels selfish. You begin living not as yourself, but as an edited version of who they need you to be, quieter, smaller, endlessly accommodating. And when you dare to reclaim a piece of yourself, guilt strikes. How could I want this for me when they need me so much? The most dangerous part is that this fading does not feel dramatic. It feels like surrender, like compromise, like keeping the peace. Until one day, you realize you've kept the peace by abandoning yourself. Toxic love convinces you that the price of harmony is your own disappearance. But a love that requires you to stop existing is not love, it is possession. And if you do not notice, if you do not resist, you may lose not only the relationship but also the very person you once were. The weight of guilt. In a healthy relationship, space is natural. Two people can breathe without fear. Silence is not rejection, solitude is not abandonment, and boundaries are not betrayals. But in a toxic relationship, the rules are rewritten. What should be normal becomes forbidden. Wanting space is seen as coldness. Enjoying solitude is framed as selfishness. Setting boundaries is twisted into proof that you don't care enough. And from these distortions, guilt is born. At first, it is subtle. You feel uneasy when you ask for a night to yourself. You hesitate before saying you're too tired to talk. You start crafting excuses for wanting to see friends or spend time alone. The message, whether spoken outright or delivered in unspoken looks and silences, is clear: prioritizing yourself is an act of betrayal. The guilt deepens through manipulation. It may not always come in loud accusations, sometimes it arrives in soft but cutting words: "You've changed. You don't care about me like you used to." Or worse, if it were the other way around, "Would never do this to you." These statements pierce the heart, turning natural self-care into emotional crime. You begin to believe that your very needs are proof of your selfishness. Freud described this process as the punishment of the superego, that inner voice shaped by criticism and authority, which condemns you for wanting what is normal and healthy. In toxic love, that superego is reinforced daily by your partner's reactions. Every sigh, every withdrawal of affection, every angry silence serves as evidence that you have done wrong simply by existing as yourself. Soon, you no longer wait for guilt to be imposed, you anticipate it. You censor yourself before the words leave your mouth. You apologize for things that shouldn't require apologies. You begin living like you are under constant surveillance, editing your every action to avoid punishment. The result is a constant state of tension, always alert, always available, always guilty. The toll is enormous. You stop relaxing in your own skin. Sleep becomes shallow, laughter becomes rare, joy feels dangerous. Every decision feels weighed down by the question, how will this affect them? And behind it all lurks the unspoken belief that true love demands sacrifice, that to love is to erase yourself. But here is the cruelest part, guilt does not only keep you submissive, it makes you responsible. You start believing that their moods, their stability, even their happiness rests entirely on your shoulders. If they are upset, it must be your fault. If they withdraw, you must have caused it. Slowly, their emotional life becomes your burden to carry. This is how guilt transforms from a passing feeling into a tool of control. It keeps you tethered, not by chains, but by the fear of being bad. And yet, the truth is simple, love should never make you feel guilty for being yourself. A bond that punishes your needs is not love, it is control. The question, then, is this: what happens when guilt turns into full responsibility for their suffering? That is the next trap, and it binds even tighter. Carrying their pain. You've thought about leaving. Maybe late at night, staring at the ceiling, you've rehearsed conversations in your mind, how you would explain it, how you would walk away, how you would finally breathe again. But each time, something stops you. Not just fear of the unknown, not just loneliness. What stops you is them, their suffering. You tell yourself, I can't abandon them now. They've been through so much. They only act this way because of their past. If I leave, they'll fall apart. Their pain becomes your chain. It binds you more effectively than passion or guilt ever could. This is where love mutates into obligation. You stop being a partner and become a caregiver, a protector, even a parent. The relationship stops being about us and becomes about keeping them from breaking. Every tear they shed feels like proof that you must stay. Every outburst convinces you they need you more. And if they threaten collapse, if they hint at not surviving without you, the weight of responsibility becomes unbearable. You tell yourself that leaving would not just hurt them, it would destroy them. But here lies the dangerous illusion: what feels like compassion is often emotional imprisonment. You confuse empathy with obligation, care with self-erasure. Carl Jung described this as identification with the archetype of the martyr, the savior who sacrifices everything for the other, even if in the process they destroy themselves. It feels noble, even holy. But behind the mask of nobility lies a deep disconnection from your own worth. Eric Fromm echoed this in his writings on neurotic love. He explained that some relationships are sustained not out of freedom, but out of fear and need. You don't stay because you want to, you stay because you feel you must. The partner's suffering becomes a weapon, often unconsciously, to keep you tethered. Every time they crumble, you rush to catch them, not realizing that their pain now controls you. And here is the truth most painful to admit: your presence does not save them. More often, it postpones the inevitable. By carrying their pain for them, you deny them the chance to face it themselves. You absorb the weight, but the cracks in their soul remain untouched. Instead of healing, both of you sink deeper. Worse still, this suffering often feels strangely familiar. It echoes something from your past, perhaps a parent you tried to protect, a sibling you felt responsible for, an old wound that taught you love means carrying burdens that were never yours. That familiarity makes the pain feel like home. And so, you stay, not only for them, but because on some level you are reenacting an old role you once knew too well. This is why leaving feels impossible. Because it's not just about this partner, it's about a script written long ago, one where your worth was measured by how much you could endure, how much you could sacrifice, how much pain you could hold that was not your own. But here's the cruelest truth: you cannot save someone who refuses to face themselves. Their suffering is not your responsibility. Carrying it does not heal them, it only breaks you. And in time, even the strongest shoulders collapse under a weight that was never meant to be theirs. The trap of repetition. Have you ever noticed how some relationships feel like déjà vu? Different faces, different names, but the same script playing out again and again. The same arguments, the same silences, the same aching absence of what you truly need. You swear this time will be different, that you have learned, that you know what to avoid. Yet somehow, you find yourself right back in the same cycle. This is not coincidence. It is a pattern. And in psychology, Freud gave it a name, the compulsion to repeat. It is the unconscious drive to recreate past pain, not because we enjoy suffering, but because we are trying, desperately, to rewrite the story. As children, many of us lived through instability, rejection, or emotional absence. Deep inside, a part of us still hopes that if we replay the same script with someone new, the ending will finally change. This time, they will stay. This time, we will be enough. This time, we will finally be loved the way we always needed. But the tragedy is that the pattern rarely changes. Instead, it pulls us deeper. We are not responding to the present, we are chasing ghosts from the past. The partner in front of us becomes a stand-in for the parent who wasn't there, the caregiver who withheld affection, the figure who made us feel small. We don't see them as they are, we see them through the lens of what we once lacked. Freud also spoke of transference, the way we project unresolved emotions from childhood onto new relationships. That is why someone emotionally unavailable feels strangely magnetic. Not because we enjoy being neglected, but because their distance activates an old memory, the unhealed wound of trying to win love from someone who could not give it. Deep down, we believe that if we can finally make this new person love us, it will erase the old hurt. But it doesn't. Instead, the pattern repeats. The silences return. The instability resurfaces. The old wound is reopened. And the cycle of suffering becomes familiar, even comfortable. We start to confuse pain with passion, chaos with love. Healthy relationships, by comparison, feel strange, too calm, too steady, even boring. Our nervous system is so wired for instability that peace feels unnatural. This is the cruel trap. Toxicity becomes your comfort zone. You convince yourself that you are choosing freely, but in truth, the past is choosing for you. And even when you realize what's happening, even when you know you are repeating an old story, you still hesitate to break free. Because as painful as the pattern is, it feels safer than the unknown. That is the darkest part of repetition. It convinces you that suffering is familiar, therefore suffering is love. And so you stay. Not because it is good, not because it is right, but because the emptiness of stepping outside the pattern feels even more terrifying than the pain of living inside it. But the question remains, what lies beyond the repetition? If you dared to leave the script unfinished, if you stopped trying to rewrite the past through others, what would remain? That leads us to the final and most frightening truth, the fear of emptiness. The fear of emptiness. You've thought about leaving. You've pictured the silence, the freedom, the space to finally breathe. Maybe you've even imagined mornings without tension, nights without arguments, days where you can simply be yourself again. But just as quickly as the hope rises, fear creeps in. A hollow, unsettling voice whispers, "What if I am nothing without them? What if no one else will ever love me? What if this pain is better than the emptiness waiting for me outside?" This is one of the most paralyzing illusions of toxic love, the belief that life without the relationship will be unbearable. It is not only fear of loneliness. It is fear of identity. Because over time, your sense of self has become so fused with the other person that leaving feels like losing your reflection. Who are you without them? Where do you end and they begin? Carl Jung spoke of this as the failure of individuation, the inability to develop into a whole, distinct self. When your identity fuses with another's, their absence feels like your own collapse. Without them, you feel formless, as if you have no structure of your own. And so, staying, even in suffering, feels safer than the terrifying prospect of facing yourself. Eric Fromm added another layer to this truth. He wrote that many people don't love for freedom, they love for escape. Escape from the silence of being alone, from the questions that echo in solitude. Am I enough? What do I want? Who am I without someone else defining me? For those who never learned how to be whole alone, the relationship becomes anesthesia. It numbs the fear, even as it destroys the soul. And that is why the emptiness feels so much worse than the pain. Because pain is familiar, you know how to live inside it. But emptiness? Emptiness is unknown, uncharted, terrifying. The mind whispers that suffering with someone is better than vanishing alone. The heart convinces itself that known misery is safer than the mystery of starting over. Yet here lies the truth you've avoided. The emptiness you fear is not a void, it is space. Space to breathe, to rediscover, to rebuild. It is not the absence of life, but the ground on which a new life can grow. The fear of emptiness is really the fear of meeting yourself without distraction, of facing wounds without a partner to project them onto, of standing whole without leaning on anyone else. And this is where courage comes in. Courage is not walking away without pain, it is walking away despite the pain. It is looking at the emptiness and realizing it is not your enemy. It is your beginning. Because true love cannot come from fear. It cannot come from guilt, or repetition, or the desperate need to carry someone else's suffering. True love begins when you no longer need to erase yourself to be with another. So if you are standing at that edge, staring into the emptiness, know this: the fear you feel is proof you are on the threshold of freedom. The emptiness is not the end of you, it is the return to you.